Thank you, everyone. I'll tell you what, it's been a great day so far, and we're going to end on a good high note today with what we have with science in the big room, applying firefighting research. We have a very, very good-sized crowd here. I'm glad you guys all came out. I appreciate it. Like Bobby mentioned, my name is Eric Roden, editor-in-chief of Fire Rescue Magazine, and I'm also battalion chief with the City of Milwaukee Fire Department assigned to the 5th Battalion. And I'm also on the advisory board of the UL's Firefighter Safety Research Institute. With this crowd, you know, in having a size of crowd that we have here today, we have a good ratio of those that are maybe curious about what they've been hearing over the last couple of years about all this firefighting research stuff. Those that are maybe skeptical of what they've been reading and hearing over the last couple of years, and that's good, you know, because then you lead into the other ratio that we have in the room, those that have an understanding of the firefighter or fire-based research that we've been able to conduct. So we have a good presentation. We have the three best guys to explain it to you all today. We're going to start with Chief Healy, a deputy chief in the FDNY. He's going to talk about a couple of bad fires in New York City and why they decided to undertake and join in on all this firefighting research. Dan from NIST will discuss the fire dynamics and structures, kind of a lot of the science and the wonky stuff, if you will, behind all this, because it's important to hear. You know, you guys definitely want to delve into the stuff, read it, and get to that understanding phase. And Dan, nobody can get you on that path better than Dan. Steve Kerber is going to discuss a component of the research that was concluded last year. Also performed, a lot of it performed in my town as well, on attic fires and the technical considerations associated with fires in attic spaces. And at the very end, I'll be narrating a video and kind of discussing what I call the urban and narrative fallacy, that none of this stuff is really, applicable to those in a big city that may get adequate resources. There are a lot of people that are arriving in short order, in under 5 minutes, in starting water and whatnot. So I'll narrate a video of a very, very common scenario in any town, not just our urban towns, but a way that a lot of our urban fire departments can incorporate this stuff and some of the things that you'll be able to do with this that'll actually allow you guys to take a more advanced fires and turn those into offensive fires. That's fires you may decide to call. So without further ado, we'll have George discuss the FDNY's motivation to change.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I know it's late in the day. This has been a week filled with some great opportunities for learning, some hands-on training, and we greatly appreciate the fact that it's late in the game here and you still have the energy up to come out and listen to us speak. As Eric said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the motivation for the FDNY. A lot of times when we do our show, people come up after and they say, you're the guy with the passion. And they're right. Dan and Steve have taught us things we never really knew and understood before. And they work harder probably than their bosses pay them to. And they've developed friendships that will last us a lifetime. And they understand how important it is to people like myself and Eric on the fire ground. And I'll take a little liberty with something that Ray Orozco from the Chicago Fire Department talked about, where the science meets the streets. And that happens on the fire ground for all of us on a fairly regular basis. And my involvement with these two wonderful gentlemen started back in 2006, after I was the incident commander at a fire where there was a real near tragedy. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to them, and we started down this journey. And I was blind to an awful lot. They knew an awful lot, but they've learned along the way also. So I'm going to play you a quick video, and we're going to listen to some words of a fire officer from the city of New York who got critically burned one day in a very normal, routine, quote unquote, if we can use that word, structure, a private dwelling. No big, serious high-rise, city of New York, multi-story dwelling, a 2.5-story peaked roof private dwelling. And within 11 minutes of him arriving on the scene, he was being removed from the building, not under his own power, but by his brother and sister firefighters, with critical, almost life-ending burn injuries. And we'll listen to some of his own words. And now remember, this was back in 2002. This was prior to this partnership. This was prior, to a large extent, to my real education into fire dynamics. And at the time, we understood what we were capable of understanding. We only had certain labels in the FDNY. And I'll tell you how we labeled this incident and the findings that we had after this incident. But fast forward a decade later, with a new, greater appreciation for fire dynamics, a greater understanding, a different set of eyes. And now when we look back and I listen to his own words, he was telling us what happened. We just weren't listening. We were just falling back to that default that we always had. Well, if a fireman got burnt, who should we blame? The engine? The engine didn't do their job. If a firefighter got burned, the engine screwed something up. We know a lot better now. As I mentioned to you, a very average structure. The type of building that you folks respond to every day of the week. The type of structure that you don't particularly pull up to and say, I could get myself jammed up here, although you can. There's a lot of hazards in private dwellings. But typically, these are our day-to-day bread and butter responses. We come to these buildings, we safely mitigate the emergency, and in short order, we're on our way back to the firehouse. Sorry about that.
The date was November 7th, 2002, a year after 9/11. I was working in ladder 165 as a covering officer. We had lunch. An alarm came in. When we arrived, I did my perimeter search. I saw that there were 3 basement windows fully involved. So we know we have the basement fire. The engine company had gotten there before us. We go in. As we're crawling in, we suited up. We're crawling in. My ironsman asks if he can take a window to help get some of the smoke out. Right now, the smoke is about at 3 feet off the ground. Then when the temperature jumped up, the smoke banked down to the ground. Can't see a thing. Pitch black. So now we're just trying to follow our way out that we came in, and then it flashes over. We don't get more than, 5 feet, and the whole place lights up. And when it flashes over, the floor is on fire, the walls are on fire, everything in the room ignites.
Flames from a mattress fire that began in the basement of this St. Albans home became so intense they burned through the ceiling, causing a bookcase to topple on firefighters responding on the first floor.
I got up, started running, tripped, fell, lost my helmet. I got up again, tripped and fell again, hit something else. Third time I got up, or fourth time, I'm not sure. I must have hit an entertainment center and it fell on top of me. And now my face piece is burning off. The straps that hold it are melting or burning. I have to hold the face piece on with my hands or I'm gonna breathe in the superheated gases. So now I have to hold the face piece on. I have this entertainment center on top of me and I can't get it off. And now I'm losing strength. All I can do is hold this face piece on and move one leg. And then all of a sudden, things started getting dark. And I'm figuring my mask is running out. I heard the vibro alarm alert going off, which tells you only have a few minutes left of air. And then everything started getting dark. It was the engine company, the second due engine company, coming in and putting the fire out. They didn't even know I was in there. They thought I made it out with the other guys. The time that elapsed, the safety battalion determined, was only about 15 to 30 seconds. But I was burnt really bad in that time. It seemed like a long time for me. And then all chaos broke loose because they realized I was in there and they got me out, they got me on the stretcher. The chief got my wife's information. I was able to give him that. I was conscious the whole time, and I was angry. I more angry than anything else that this happened. I couldn't believe that I'm 10 feet from a door and I'm going to die. I'm not going to make this. The pain was excruciating initially. And then I think I just went into shock. It was, everything was burning. I'm burnt 50%. Everything was cooking. And I had no helmet. The pain on the top of my head was incredible. I think there's three things to becoming the best firefighter and the safest firefighter and going home at night. And number one is you need to be in physically good shape. And it's part of the job. You want to be a fireman, you just got to make that commitment now to be physically fit for your career, because you're going to be called on to do things that you need to be physically fit. Training. Always stay in the books. It's your job. You should know everything there is to know about your job. It can keep you alive. And the gear, you got the gear. It makes a difference. When I lost my helmet in that fire, it changed the dynamics completely. The panic level went up tenfold once that helmet came off. If I could do it over again, I would have had that chin strap on, and who knows, that might have made the difference of me getting out and not getting out.
We'd like to thank the DC Fire Department for producing this video and bringing Stephen's words, his own words, to life. Stephen telling his own story. Who wasn't affected watching that? Would it be possible for you not to be affected, especially in the profession that we're in? Think about a daily routine in your life. There are enough hours in the day? How often on a daily basis do we run behind? We find ourselves, we should have been out of the house 10 minutes ago and we have someplace important to go. Maybe you have to get yourselves cleaned up and changed. So you run upstairs, you change quick, you grab the keys, you run out to the car and you start the car. Think Stephen can do that? Think Stephen can run upstairs, change a pair of pants, button a shirt, and get out the door in 5 minutes? As an incident commander, I don't want that to happen to any of my people. Think about when you burn your finger picking up a pot or something. So for a couple of days you have trouble writing or grabbing a pen. Think about Stephen on a day-to-day basis. I was giving a similar presentation one day, and after seeing Stephen's own words at one of the breaks, a fireman comes up to me and says, I've become fairly close friends with Steve. You know what he has to say was the worst part of this whole incident? It was the first time he took his teenage daughter to the mall because she didn't want to walk next to her father. That's heartbreaking. I've got kids. Most of you have kids. Can you imagine? His chin strap. That's something my department's been working hard on, to explain to our members how critically important it is to wear your gear and wear it properly. What did Stephen say about his chin strap? Could have made the difference between him getting out and not getting out. Do we always wear our chin straps? Do we always buckle our waist strap on our mask? Unfortunately, I can rattle off a number of line-of-duty deaths in my own department where very tragically a contributing factor in the death of a firefighter was failure to wear a chin strap and losing their helmet. So if we don't wear our chin strap every day, are you basically saying you're okay with getting yourself injured or killed for the sake of not wearing a chin strap? We go to classes that talk about pride and ownership. And Sean Ducrane this morning gave a very motivational keynote speech about what we need to do to prevent these things. Some pretty simple steps. 3 basement windows fully involved. Stephen's own words. Fire out the windows. Is that good for us in the fire service? We pull up and we see fire venting. What do we think? Good or bad? What were we taught? I was taught good, right? Have you heard that in training, that fire coming out the windows is a good thing? Most of us probably have. We'll get back to that a little bit later in the class. When did this incident change? I like group participation, people. I can keep you late. All right? When he took a window. Yes, I can. Traffic's building. Lock the doors in the back, please. When he took a window, my irons man asked me if I could take a window. Permission to vent. You might want to call that coordination, but we'll get back to that. A very simple structure. This is the layout of the first floor. Well, I'm sorry, the cellar. You can see that star on the bottom right-hand corner. That's the area of origin. Most of our basements and private dwellings in New York have been converted to living space, and this was no different. That's the location of where Stephen was recovered from. Remember his words. I was angry more than anything else. I'm 10 feet from a door and I'm gonna die. That's got to be a sobering revelation. 11 minutes in time, actually it was a little bit less than 11 minutes, from him stepping off the apparatus in front of that fire building to being brought out. A lot can change in a short period of time. Something that Dan and Steve will illustrate. Most of us have been taught that fires are hotter today. It's not necessarily accurate. If you want to split hairs, you might say they are, but at the temperatures today's fires are reaching, and even at the temperatures post-flashover of the legacy rooms, it doesn't mean much when wearing gear that the face piece is rated for about 300 degrees and our bunker gear is rated for a standard of about 500. So these were the findings that the FDNY came up with after a multi-month investigation. There was a delayed alarm with an incorrect address. That happens. That happens to us. That happens to you. Because there were 2 alarm assignments sent out for the same incident, we had 1 engine on the scene and the second engine was greatly delayed. That's going to become a tactical issue we have to deal with. This is where we really place the blame. As I said to you earlier, typically in my career, what I've seen is if a firefighter gets burned, the blame winds up getting placed on the engine. You didn't do your job, and now look what we're dealing with. We got a firefighter burned over 50% of his body. He's going to spend the next 3 months in the hospital. We hope he pulls through and he doesn't succumb to infection. And the very same thing happened at this incident. When the engine and the truck had difficulty locating the interior stairs to the basement, they called out to the incident commander and asked for permission to reposition the line because they were being told that there was access in the rear directly into the basement. That message was acknowledged, permission was granted, the line was repositioned, and then Stephen got critically burned. And we blamed the engine company. But that's really all we knew. That's all we understood. But then we began our education through Dan and Steve. We started looking at the horizontal ventilation studies, the vertical ventilation studies. And when we started to see the impact of our ventilation tactics that were born out of the 1970s, the war years in the FDNY, and had served us extremely well, maybe not as well as we thought, but they had served us well for several decades, we blamed the engine company and we overlooked the fact that ventilation was going on. But after we got educated, and now we listen to Stephen's own words, we say to ourselves, you know what changed here? Was the line repositioned? Absolutely. But the game changer was, my irons man asked me if I could take the windows. And now we know it's the new buzzword, and hey, that's wonderful. But now I understand that we created a flow path. that allowed that heat and smoke to come up the stairs. That vent wasn't big enough to get all the bad stuff out, and Stephen was critically burned. I've heard in the past, well, you know, Chief Healy, we've heard you, and you're on a crusade, and you get up on your soapbox, and you're very passionate. But I know guys in the FDNY, and they tell me that you're not implementing this stuff. Well, here are our books. My department is implementing it. The leadership of my department has been in favor of this testing and has not taken Chief Healy's word, but had several hundred members of the department involved in this process, exposed to this process on Governor's Island, and have made decisions to change our tactics, not based solely on fireground experience and interpretation of what we think is occurring on the fireground, but marrying my experience on the fireground and the data from the testing that they've provided to us to make changes like this. Incident commanders, chief officers, or company officers should consider ordering an exterior hose line operated into a cellar window to allow for a quick knockdown when there will be a delay in applying from the interior, or whenever the fire conditions dictate. Back in 2002, we were fighting fires from the unburned to the burned, protecting the interior stairs by that first line going through the front door, maintaining their position if they couldn't go down the stairs, or hopefully going down the stairs and putting the fire out. And if we had to, we could reposition the line, which happened that day. We've changed our thought process. Exterior hose lines. Using an exterior hose line. It should only be attempted when no members are operating in the cellar. We're not talking about opposing hose lines, right? Tactical discipline. It must be carefully coordinated and communicated to all units operating on the scene. The primary consideration for members operating on the first floor above a cellar fire would be to shut the door at the top of the stairs. This is still a coordinated attack. And it's still an offensive attack strategy. It's not defensive, even though we're on the outside. The following options should be considered for the safety of all members on the first floor. Operate under the protection of a hose line. Secure an area of refuge or a ready means of egress, or just get out of the building. Communication coordination. But then we put in a note. In an emergency, such as members trapped by fire in the cellar or endangered by fire because of collapse, the IC should order the immediate operation of hose lines into cellar windows. Steve Kerber and Dan Medrikowski have proved to us, and we use straight stream, that the operation of a hand line with a straight stream nozzle is not going to injure a firefighter who is already in danger due to changing fire conditions. We didn't have to do that on the fire ground and guess if we were going to hurt somebody. We were able to do it with them in the laboratory and in acquired structures, and we haven't done it once. They've done it several hundred times now. Because my department wasn't looking to make any radical changes based on one or two tests and a bunch of assumptions. We've done this an awful lot to prove that we can safely do it for our firefighters. Proper placement of the first hose line requires a coordinated size up. We've done it on the fire ground. This is a fire that happened in Queens. Heavy fire condition on arrival. Our tactic still is to bring that first line through the front door. From the front, it's an attached structure. There were no means of putting water on the basement fire from the exterior in the front. When we got our 360, which is good sound firefighting, now we had a little bit more information. A report was transmitted, hey, we've got direct access in the rear. We communicated to the units on the first floor. We have a coordinated attack, and we rapidly knocked the fire down with no one being injured. Can we make it safer? This was a fire in New York where Richie Scalfani died, on the landing between the basement and the first floor. It took us over 22 minutes to get him up, I think it was 7 steps and about 8 feet and out the front door. The FDNY, who responds on an initial alarm with 56 members. Why did it take us so long? Because conditions were so severe, our other members could not operate in that stairwell, in the flow path, for more than seconds without being burned. And Richie succumbed to his injuries. Sean Ducrane talked about it this morning. We owe it to Richie. We owe it to his family to not allow another death similar to his to occur again. It's no criticism of the operation or how Richie was operating that day. It's a tribute to his legacy, to his sacrifice, to his family's sacrifice, because our people are far too important. And we can listen to other instructors like Gordon Graham, who says, we haven't developed new ways to get injured or killed in the fire service. The same themes play out time and time again. An identifiable risk is a manageable risk. This is a manageable risk. Let's identify it and let's prevent it. Because at this fire, there was a request from the outside. Can we open up a hose line? And the answer was no. It was prior to the science. There's plenty of NIOSH reports, folks. And the occurrences on the fire ground that lead to these sad reports about injuries and deaths are being mirrored in the work and the experiments we're doing. Fire departments should ensure that incident commanders and firefighters understand the influence of ventilation on fire behavior and effectively coordinate ventilation and suppression. What did the Admiral talk about today? A culture of problem solving. They empower their SEALs to problem solve. I said it last year in my keynote address. Training is for the knowns. We know we're going to have to cut a roof. This is how you cut a roof. Education. Education is for the unknowns. Some of the people that want to criticize this work say, well, no two fires are alike. You're right. So we're not telling you this is how you have to do it every time. We're educating the fire service. We're giving them the power on the fire ground to problem solve. When I was a firefighter in Rescue 1, Terry Hatton, the captain of Rescue 1, who died on 9/11, said to us, you're not firefighters, you're fire officers. If you're a member of my company, you are as good and as valuable to the fire chief on the scene as an officer. You're the ones that are going to give him that information that's going to make him change his attack strategy to keep firefighters safe. You, each and every one of you, are an officer. He empowered us to be problem solvers on the fire ground. This contributory factor, tactical ventilation, points to the need for training on the influence of tactical operations, particularly ventilation. A vent opening made between a firefighter or their victim and a path of egress could be fatal if the fire is pulled to their location. Charleston. Honor those 9 members. The report talks about it. We should be able to talk about it. The report mentions it. We should be able to mention it. We owe it to them. God forbid I ever die in the line of duty. Don't sugarcoat it. I'll be pissed. Don't sugarcoat it. Talk about it honestly. Don't let it happen to someone else. We owe it to them. Are you seeing the pattern here? Oh, here's another one. 2 firefighters involved in this incident were seriously injured. There's plenty of these NIOSH reports. Horizontal and vertical ventilation conducted and a powered positive pressure ventilation fan was utilized. UL's looking at positive pressure ventilation fans. They're answering the fire service's questions. The fire service is dictating and driving the work that Steve Kerber and Dan Medrikowski are doing. Enabling the fire service to problem solve on the fire ground. We have our toolbox, we have our Swiss Army knife. Whether it be a transitional attack, a direct frontal attack, an offensive attack strategy, a defensive attack strategy, control, communicate, and coordinate. We all need to know what's happening on the fire ground. Perhaps a flanking attack, tactical ventilation. Educate yourselves, educate your members so you can be problem solvers on the fire ground.